So I will grab my tea that I already have and sit and go through story with you. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's been a couple of weeks since I uploaded, and truth be told, I've been wanting to do this video for quite a while and not known quite how I wanted to sort of put it together. So I spent a lot of time thinking about it and not a lot of time actually doing it. So yeah, I just wanted to tell our story of Noah's diagnosis, because we actually for a long time didn't suspect that Noah was autistic. We almost come to the realisation whilst in the process of seeking a diagnosis, which is strange because so many people have to fight tooth and nail to get a diagnosis, but our story actually wasn't like that. So whether that's reflective of luck or the severity of Noah's behaviours at the time, I don't know, but yeah, I feel our story is quite unique actually. So for some context, my eldest, who's 14, he was quite a poorly baby. He suffered with reflux and used to get a lot of infections in his first year. So yeah, my eldest was in hospital quite a lot in his first year and was quite poorly, and he cried like a lot all the time. So I thought that was how babies were. We muddled through, but I thought that's what parenting was. That's what babies did, just cried all the time. So fast forward 7 years when Noah came along, and he just slept. Like I think he slept more in the first like 48 hours of life, certainly, than he does now. But he was just so placid. You could put him down, change him, feed him, didn't cry ever. And I thought, wow, is this what, you know, normal babies are like? And we just counted our blessings really. This sort of easy baby. And there was even a GP once when I took him to an appointment of mine that said I've never ever met such a placid, chilled out little baby. And obviously I took it as a compliment. I was sort of beaming like, yay, you know, I've got this lovely well-behaved baby. We never ever had a concern about his behaviour, his development. He hit all his developmental milestones up until we reached like the speech and communication milestones. I mean, he was a little bit late walking, but well within the ranges of normal. So he was 1 in the July, was walking in the November. Yeah, so that winter, Noah was quite poorly, had a lot of ear infections, and I think a couple of times he had to go to hospital. I think we definitely had like the first response car out once for sure, and many out of hours doctor's appointments. And we've been quite fortunate to that point because he hadn't really been very poorly. So compared to Connor, who was in and out of hospital constantly for maybe his first couple of years of life, Noah had sort of gone that far without any hospital admissions. Yeah, so by the March of the following year, so March 2015, Noah hadn't made any effort to talk by that point. Previously said, Mum, Dad, sorry, I'm just laughing at Connor. Mum, Dad, dog, cat, all the normal sort of first words, but hadn't yet attempted to communicate his needs or wants. So I took him to a health visitor sort of drop-in morning, and we went in, and I'd said that I was concerned that he'd had a lot of ear infections and perhaps it had affected his speech and his communication skills. So I went in, and Noah was his normal self. He was laying on the floor as he did, and he would lay on the floor and he would sort of, if this was a toy, he would sort of lay on the floor and sort of drive like a toy car really close to his face, or sometimes he used to get objects really close up to his face and he would sort of look at them really close over his head. What other things did he do?
He would do his stimming, which he still does.
Yeah. He'd
line cars up.
Yeah, line cars up.
Make traffic jams.
Separate diggers from other cars, and we'd just moved up to Nottingham actually, and he would put all of his vehicles on the TV unit. We didn't think anything of it, we just thought it was sort of quirky behaviour and weren't concerned at all, perhaps naively. This is Connor's disguise. Meaningless, eat your heart out.
Yep.
See the reflection of the ring light in your glasses? It looks like you've got big pupils. You look like a cartoon character. With it being March, the heating was still on, so they had a heater in the room, and Noah had a thing for extremes of temperature. So at home, if the freezer was open and you were getting sort of food out, he would put his hand sort of in the freezer, sometimes his face on the freezer door, and the same with the oven when that was on, he would try and touch that. So with this heater being on, he sort of put his cheek up against it, sort of his nose, his forehead, all of his sort of face. They had office chairs in the room and he was laying on the floor and wanted to be spinning the wheels of the office chair. So the health visitor said, does he always behave like this? And I sort of said yeah, and only in that moment did it dawn on me that perhaps it wasn't normal. So she started asking some really specific questions about his like of extremes of temperature. Does he seek out any other sort of sensory extremes? She asked about, does he like to sort things by colour or toys? And I explained about the cars that he would line up and all the sort of toys that he would put on the TV unit. And it was only when I sort of left that meeting that I thought perhaps this could be something more. So she advised, the health visitor advised, that what they would do is make a referral to speech and language, but she advised that the wait times were months and months and months, but they had a speech and language therapist that could do like an initial assessment on site within the children's centre. So she referred to her and also referred Noah for a hearing test to rule out his hearing as a cause for him not yet speaking. So this is all March 2015. So he wasn't even going to be 2 until July 2015. So by the end of April the same year, Noah had been for his hearing test, which he passed with flying colours. So what they do with children that young is they sort of have the child sat on the parent's knee, and they have speakers over here, and they will make a sound come out of this speaker to see if the child looks, and they'll make a sound come out of this speaker to see if the child looks, and they will make the sound so that it sounds like it's travelling from one speaker to the other to see if the child follows the sound. And that's how they make their assessment, based on I think it's like beeping sounds, like a marble dropping. Yeah, so without checking the paperwork, I don't know when our first paediatrician appointment would have been. I want to say June or July. I know it was quite quick, or I could be wrong, it might have been ages. In our area in Nottinghamshire, they have community paediatricians who ask for assessments from all different professionals working with the family, and then they will meet you and make an assessment on the child. So long before Noah's diagnosis, we have a service in Nottinghamshire called the Schools and Family Specialist Services. They are made up of teachers and teaching assistants, or ex-teachers and teaching assistants. So the Schools and Family Specialist Services, they offer support to children with additional needs and families of children with additional needs, and that's before your diagnosis, if you haven't got a diagnosis. And they offer almost like at-home learning provision, even if the children aren't even of school age, like Noah wasn't. So Noah wasn't even 2, so if I remember correctly, he'd had his assessment before his birthday, before his 2nd birthday, and we were allocated the lovely Karen, who was like our champion through the whole diagnosis process. We were allocated her in July, I think, and we had her right up until Noah went off to special school, which was sort of sad that we had to lose her, but obviously she didn't really have a role with him moving across to special school, but we love her so much. She is a gift to children's services. I think in that time we had one visit from one speech and language therapist, who we since found out was from the autism team, but at the time she just introduced herself as from a specialist team. So they all provided reports, and in that time we had made like a home learning plan. We'd done a portage assessment actually, which will assess the child based on their developmental age. So that will give you an age for each developmental stage. So communication, I think Noah was, I want to say 0 to 6 months, because at that point he didn't even point to tell you what he wanted. So we literally, like a baby, would go down the list of what's wrong with him. You know, does he want to drink? Is he hungry? Is he tired? Quite how we didn't know he was autistic at that point, I don't know. But we started to toy with the idea over that sort of summer of him actually being autistic. And if I'm honest, when we started to tell people we were undergoing an assessment and the thought was perhaps he was autistic, we felt silly saying it, like we were being dramatic, because we hadn't even thought it at that stage. And I remember telling friends of ours, oh, Noah might be autistic. And they said, oh no, don't be silly, of course he's not. And I felt silly. I felt like I was being dramatic, and that I was sort of thinking of the worst case scenario at that point. Yeah, it's such a strange concept to have potential diagnosis thrust upon you, and that's how it felt at the time. It felt, I don't know, we were propelled forward, I think, by all the work that needed doing, the appointments, the assessments, the phone calls and all those type of things, and I think you just busy yourself with those sort of menial tasks, and there were so many other things going on at the time as well, so I forget the timings, but I did write a blog post on it, which I will link below, but I've deliberately not reread that because I didn't want to just regurgitate that information. I wanted to be able to tell the story as I remember it now, as opposed to what it was, you know, raw and in that same year. But Noah had been, he wasn't kicked out of his nursery, but it was a private nursery and they hadn't applied for any additional funding, which this is where Karen comes in again. So Karen was the sort of portal with information for us for the nursery, and she let us know about funding that was available. So even pre-diagnosis for Noah, we could apply for disability living allowance, which would then make him eligible to access 15 hours of early education for free. Then, because he was attending sort of as a disabled child on the 15 hours, they would then be able to apply for funding for basically the one-to-one time that he needed. They didn't apply for that funding for whatever reason, and Noah used to bite other children, which for me was down to poor supervision because he hasn't ever done that since. But the manager of the nursery actually pulled me aside and said, look, this is getting a little bit embarrassing now. All the parents of children that Noah's bitten, other children used to call Noah Naughty Noah. Bear in mind this is a child who's just turned 2. They didn't appear to do anything about it, and when they said that if this behaviour would carry on, we wouldn't be able to send him anymore, we pulled him out there and then. We didn't send him back, and we were of the view that we'd just keep him at home. We wouldn't send him to any early years provision. It was this time in 2014 when Noah could stand up in his cot. So he was coming up to a year old, and he could stand up in his cot, and that was when the sleep problem started. As soon as he could stand up in his cot, he stopped sleeping, or stopped sleeping well, and would stay up until really late at night. So when we went to see the paediatrician, she done us a prescription for melatonin, and that was a godsend to begin with. It doesn't work anymore, but that's a story for another day. We got Noah's diagnosis in December 2015, so he was 2 years and 5 months old. I know it was the beginning of December 2015, but I want to say it was like the 8th of December. Not that matters. But I just started my blog, The Scenic Route to Sanity, and I'd written a blog post that day. I literally just poured out my feelings on paper, well, on keyboard. I think the main sort of behaviours that were listed on his diagnosis were his language delay, so still no language, and also behaviours that, not that we hadn't noticed before, actually hadn't considered were abnormal behaviours. So, you know, the cars past the face, the things really close to his face, and a lot of verbal sounds he would make, sort of hands and feet stimming all the time, which we didn't think anything of, thought that was perhaps normal baby behaviour.
I'll get the definition of stimming up and you can read it.
Okay.
Stimming, behaviour consisting of repetitive actions or movements of a type that may be displayed by people with development disorders, most typically autistic spectrum disorders, self-stimulation. I
think the thing that surprised us the most was that early diagnosis doesn't necessarily mean early intervention, doesn't equal support services, and there's no services to sort of catch you after you have the diagnosis. So the diagnosis is your goal for months, maybe years, if you're one of the unfortunate people that have to fight for years and years for a diagnosis. But once you get it, you sort of hit this what now. And no one talks to you about the emotional side of it either. So you've been propelling for this diagnosis and pushing for it, and then when you get it, it feels like you've been wishing for it. And then you get all the guilt for feeling glad but also feeling sad, and
Mum's got balls.
and then feeling sad and sort of mourning the child that you thought you were going to have, then feeling bad because you should be grateful that your child hasn't got life-limiting disease or anything. And no one really prepares you for or explains the care that you're going to need to do. There's no real, I mean, there are support groups, but you don't know how to find them unless you already belong to supportive networks.
Some of them are a bit shy.
Which we didn't. I haven't used any. To be honest, I haven't actually reached out and used any support groups at all until the other school parents at Noah's school. But obviously we're 5 years on from that now.
Noah!
Come here!
Oh, I hope that picked up on the camera.
No! He's still saying okay.
Because he didn't want you to shout him again.
Noah!
What?
Come here, I've got the camera. Do you want to come on?
Thunderstorm.
A thunderstorm? Where?
Oh no, it's a thunderstorm.
Come on.
Look at the blue.
Look, it's Noah. Oh no, where you going, Noah? Say hi.
Hi.
So when it comes to Noah and his autism, there's loads of different things that I could probably cover, like our fight to get him a education healthcare plan, which otherwise known as an EHC plan, which is what children need to get into a special school. That's a whole nother video on its own. So what I will do is I will make this a bit of a series. So it's currently 10 past midnight, and as you can hear, Noah is far from sleeping. So I'm going to end this video here, and thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye. I've just been talking to myself, which means I didn't get that. Did you call me gay? No, I said okay.
Have a button. Chocolate button.
Yes, you can have a button. They're dark milk though. They're like...
What are you going to show the camera?
No, it doesn't focus. Like, I can't be like one of them because you can't... Oh yeah, it did that time. Anywho, got 2 minutes left on this because you're making me not get to my story. I've got a lot of story left to tell. You haven't got a cat though.
Exactly. What are you got?
Ruby, why are you naughty? Oh my god, ow, Ruby!
Embarrassed you having me having you as a mum, but
Do you actually?
don't put that in the video.
No, I'm not going to put it in the video because people think you're an arsehole.
No, because
Have a nice poo.
I'm going for it.
You taking your sandwich with you?
No, I don't really have it in my hand.